Infrastructure, well, there's the usual suspects, right? And the usual suspect is, of course, AWS being the long-standing now decade-plus market leader in terms of cloud-based, hosting and environments. So AWS, Azure, GCP, and you know what I'm going to list as the number 4. It's kind of a catch-all, but I'm going to throw it up here as a representative of a different approach, and that is DigitalOcean, sort of the biggest of the non-big 3 players. And what I'll note next to each one is sort of the why. So AWS, that's the default. They're the big dog, right? So I'm just going to call them the default option. And they offer so many services and capabilities that why not, right? Why not go with AWS? You can't lose with that simple choice. And generally speaking, I would say that that's true. Why would you go with Azure then, if AWS is your default? So in some cases, Microsoft, well, this is true of both Microsoft with Azure and GCP. They both compete on price. There's also Oracle Cloud. There are others out there. They tend to compete on price with giveaways and such versus AWS. With Azure specifically, it's for the AI, for the open AI, and you might even say for the AI credits. There's tons of credits being handed out to startups, so that's one good reason. You might go to Azure is for the AI credits. Also, for .NET shops, it's just a logical choice. And then, depending on the service, in many cases, they are cheaper than AWS. For GCP, here's what I'm honestly going to say. It's going to seem mean, but it's why. I'm not really sure what GCP is giving you that AWS and Azure, don't in terms of options. It's just they're just sort of there. If you have a developer who happens to know GCP as the stack that they worked on in the past, well, it's fine. It's not like it's a bad choice, but I can't give you a specific reason why I would choose GCP over the others. And maybe some of you will pipe up to say what's so great about it, but go with the default. It's really not that different. All right, so then it takes me to DigitalOcean. Why on earth is DigitalOcean, a company that's like 1/10 the size of these big boys, why is it not even 1/10 the size, but why is it up here? So it's a catch-all for a different approach. DigitalOcean, at my last startup, we actually used a company called Linode, which was then bought by Akamai. All of these players that sort of do VPS hosting or, they basically give you servers. DigitalOcean does a little bit more than that, let's say, but essentially they're just giving you servers. So the idea here is if you containerize, and you don't need to go all the way to the point of Kubernetes, which is simple containerization. Certainly you could use, Kubernetes as well. If you containerize your, the server side of your application, database, etc., then, and here's where I recommend for businesses that are sub 10 million, arguably even sub 20 million ARR, generally speaking, you can get away with a monolithic application with relatively few total nodes. You could probably get away with a cluster in production of a couple of app servers, maybe a database with redundancy. It's really not a lot of infrastructure. And so instead of building out something where the costs actually here in cloud world actually run up much faster. So rather than that, if you just containerize and go with, a small number of servers, then you will find that the DigitalOceans of the world tend to be cheaper and have better price performance than the AWSs and Azures and GCPs with more flexibility. And so it's an option worth considering. By the way, if you do containerize, if you do this right, which is helpful for your developers, for their own usage on their own laptops, etc., this approach, makes it easier for them, but it also makes it easier for you to switch. So if for whatever reason, hey, you go and you get the huge AI credits on Azure, you can easily deploy those same containers over there, or you can switch to EC2 on AWS, whichever it may be. So I think that taking this approach, containerization, gives you that flexibility. And then just because everybody else is using AWS doesn't mean that you have to, we kept our costs at a ridiculously low level by staying with this kind of approach down to the bottom here. And if you're after that ruthless efficiency that leads to high profitability, it's an option worth keeping in mind.